Hey guys, welcome back to the movie summary. Beginning of the movie we see Salvador Malo. He is a famous movie director in Spain. Since last few years he has been suffering a lot physically and mentally. He remembers his family. Salvador lived in a village with his mother Jacinta. Salvador used to watch his mother when she was with her friends. He was very happy to see them. Now Salvador stopped making movies due to mental pain. His friend Julima dares him to make films. Then Salvador wants to meet Alberto. Because 30 years ago he made a movie with Alberto. Now he wants to play the same movie again. Salvador haven't talked to Alberto since 30 years. Meanwhile he remembers his childhood. As a child, Salvador was a good singer. Because he was a singer, he was easily passed in the exams with the help of school management. When Salvador started making movies, he understood what the real world was. He learned about body parts because he got diseases. Salvador finds Alberto's address. Salvador goes to Alberto's house to tell him about his movie Flavor. Alberto doesn't understand why Salvador came here after 30 years. 30 years ago Alberto was not eligible to come to the premiere of that movie. But now Salvador invites Alberto to the new premiere. Alberto has a drug habit. That's why Salvador keeps him away. But now Salvador comes to Alberto's house and takes drugs. Because he wants relief from headache and stress. Alberto is shocked to see this. Drugged up Salvador remembers his childhood again. In 1960, Salvador's parents wanted to move to another city. Jacinta stays at the station with her son. Her husband is a soldier. She wants her son not to become a soldier. Then they go to a city and look for a house. Actually the house they are going to stay is like a cave. Jacinta is sad to see this. Salvador likes the house very much. But Jacinta feels fear and pain when she sees that house. However, she understands and adjusts to her husband's financial situation. Salvador and Alberto become friends again. Then he goes home happy. After going home, he called Mercedes, who is his assistant, and said that I will not give any answer to the media. Now he is screening this movie again after 30 years, is because he wants to see what kind of response his movie gets now. Since all these days Salvador used to live alone, but now Alberto is also accompanied. As the days go by his health deteriorates. Then Alberto would help him. Apart from that, he also gave him drugs because the drugs would ease his headaches. Alberto reads his movie scripts when Salvador is drugged. Then Alberto has understand how much love Salvador has for movies. One of the scripts is about Salvador's love failure. After reading it, Alberto tells Salvador that you should show this script in the theater. But Salvador doesn't agree. Finally there will be a movie screening, movie name is Flavor. But Salvador does not appear there. So his assistant gets a lot of tension. Salvador wants to stay at home. After the movie ends, Salvador apologizes to everyone on the phone. He answers questions from the audience over the phone. After hearing his answers, Alberto realizes that Alberto is not a good actor in Salvador's eyes. They both get into a fight and get separated again. Now Salvador can't find drugs. He tries other things to relieve his headache, but his pain does not go away. Mercedes knows Salvador's situation, but he doesn't want to get help from anyone else. Salvador goes straight to the place where he gets drugs to relieve his headache. After taking drugs he remembers his childhood again. A lady comes to Jacinta with her son Edward. He didn't study. The lady asks if her son has any work to do. Jacinta then puts him to work. He works at home, instead Salvador teach study to Edward. Mercedes comes to help him. He used to take drugs without her knowledge. Mercedes tells Salvador to write stories in his spare time. But he used to take drugs and reminisce about his childhood. One day Jacinta invites a nun to her house. Jacinta tells the nun that Salvador wants to teach others. The nun wants to enroll him in a school. While studying in that school, they train him to become a father. Jacinta also agrees because her son will study for free. Salvador doesn't want to be a father. Salvador goes to Alberto's house to apologize. He also takes with him the script that Alberto wants to turn into a play and gives it to him. Alberto then gets very happy and gives his drug dealer's number to Salvador. Now Alberto wants to stay away from drugs. Because he wants to focus on his work. One day Alberto will present the script in the theater. A man named Federico watches the play. Actually, Salvador wrote this story on Federico. A few years ago Salvador and Federico were in love with each other. But due to Federico's addiction to drugs they were separated. Then Salvador writes this story. After the play Federico goes to Alberto and says that the story was written about me. Also he says he wants to meet Salvador. Salvador will be shocked to know this. Federico is outside of the Salvador house. But he has a little trouble getting in. That night they decide to meet. Salvador does not take drugs. Both of them are very happy to meet. Federico says, I am now living in Argentina. After breaking up with you I married a girl and I have 2 sons. Now we have taken divorce. After they broke up, Salvador became a big filmmaker. Federico enjoyed by watching Salvador movies. Federico invites Salvador to his house. Then Salvador says, I can't come. After Federico leaves, Salvador tries to take drugs again, but he changes his mind and throws away all the drugs. He calls Mercedes and says, I need to see a doctor. Later, he tells the doctor that I am taking drugs for my headache and my back pain. After arriving home, Salvador tells Mercedes about his mother's last days. Jacinta wants Salvador become church father. But he doesn't like become church father. Jacinta thinks that he took revenge by not spending more time with her. Salvador tells Jacinta that I'm busy with work. He then apologizes to her and says that I will treat you well from now on. Jacinta says, I want to die in my village, this is my last wish. Salvador promises Jacinta that he fulfill her last wish. But he cannot fulfill her wish. Because the next day she dies. This incident that happened 4 years ago but still haunts Salvador. A few days later, Mercedes reads a letter from Salvador. There is a drawing in it which shocks Salvador. Because Edward made that drawing many years ago. The doctor at the hospital says that Salvador does not have cancer and will be cured soon. Later they both go to art gallery. There is a drawing by Edward. No one knows how that drawing got there. Salvador buys the drawing and gets a letter along with the drawing. Edward wrote that letter to Jacinta. But Jacinta didn't tell Salvador about this. Edward wanted to thank Salvador because Salvador was his teacher. Mercedes says, let's find Edward. He says, it is already late, this drawing is enough for me to be happy. Salvador will now be ready for surgery. Before the surgery he tells the doctor that I am writing stories again. The doctor is very happy to hear this. Finally, Salvador decides to make his life story into a movie. This is how this movie ends.